Hello and welcome to my 7.0 Xbox One partitioning script supporting both Windows and Linux on Mac or PC hardware. This is the start of my Series 7 set of videos intended to both update and replace a number of my prior videos. This series applies to the Xbox One X, the Xbox One S, and the original Xbox One system models. Part of this series will include graphics like the one you see in front of you to better explain both the hardware and steps required to repair, replace, or upgrade your Xbox One hard drive. First item you'll need is an 8 GB or larger USB flash drive. This is for installing the OSU1, also known as the offline update files for repair or replace situations. Or you can use the USB flash drive as a Linux Live USB flash drive. Second is a SATA to USB adapter for connecting your current or future Xbox One hard drive to your Mac or PC. You can also directly connect your 2.5-inch SATA drive to your system with a free SATA port if you have one. Third, you'll need a good 500 gigabyte, 1 terabyte, or 2 terabyte HDD, SSD, or SSHD 2.5-inch SATA drive. Now, in the case of a Windows and Linux repair or replace situation, there are a number of rules and things that you should understand going into the process. For instance, there are a number of dashboard update rules. The first is you cannot downgrade the dashboard. So once you upgrade to the latest OSU1 or latest dashboard, you can't downgrade to an earlier version. 2, OSU1, when you download it, is always the latest version of the dashboard. Now there's one exception to that, and that's number 3, is the preview dashboard is beyond the OSU1 download. So if you're in the Xbox One preview dashboard program and something goes wrong with your hard drive, you can't just download the latest OSU1 and expect it to work. Instead, if you're on a preview dashboard and your Xbox One hard drive fails, you have to wait, sometimes for several months, for the latest OSU1 to come out and be a version beyond the preview dashboard that you're using. So it's important to note, if you're going to upgrade your hard drive, to make sure you back up your system update partition. And I'll show you how to do that in some future videos. Now, number 4 on this list is covering, in fact, number 4 and number 5 cover the OSU2 and OSU3 files. Now, I've seen on a number of forums there's some confusion about what the OSU2 and OSU3 is actually for, and neither of those files have been updated in years. The OSU2 is for if you have a system that you're looking to repair that has a pre-Windows 10 or a pre-September 2015 dashboard. So basically it's still running Windows 8 on that Xbox One system. You'll need to first fix it with OSU2 and then upgrade it again with OSU1. The OSU3 is a similar situation where it only applies to day one Xboxes. So basically Xboxes that have the November 2003 or basically the day one dashboard installed. You'll need to use the OSU3 to recover that. Now, I do a lot of repairs, and I haven't used the OSU2 or the OSU3 in over a year and a half. Now, in terms of the hardware you'll need for a Windows and Linux repair or replace, you'll need a flash drive to put OSU1 on, and it needs to be an NTFS formatted USB flash drive. And that's to do the offline update. So basically you install or copy the system update folder contained in the OSU1.zip to the root of your flash drive. And this is to fix the E106 error you're going to get when you first format a new drive. And again, I'll show you that in a future video. You'll also need a SATA to USB adapter, or it's required so that you can connect your future or current Xbox One hard drive to your PC to properly partition it. If you have a desktop or a laptop with a free SATA port or extra SATA port, you could use that instead of an adapter. Or if you have some other method of connecting your 2.5-inch SATA drive to your PC and or Mac. Now, in terms of doing repair replace, you'll need to create basically a new formatted standard sized 500 gigabyte, 1 terabyte, or 2 terabyte HDD, SSD, or SSHD. So I often get questions on my YouTube channel as to whether or not you can upgrade your Xbox One to an SSD, and you certainly can. Again, as long as it's a 2.5-inch SATA form factor, it will be fine. But it's important to keep in mind that when you're doing a repair or replace, it has to be one of those standard sizes. The drive itself can be bigger than 500 gigabyte, bigger than a terabyte, bigger than 2 terabyte, but it can only be formatted as if it were a 500 gigabyte, a 1 terabyte, or 2 terabyte drive. And the last item that I wanted to point out here is the E100 error. I get this question a lot in the comments of my videos, and that's I'm getting an E100 error. I'm trying to upgrade my hard drive, and nothing I do seems to be able to get rid of the E100 error. That's because the E100 error is a bad optical disk drive. It's not an HDD error. It's not a hard drive error. And it's important to note whenever you're doing an offline update or you're just upgrading your system in general, make sure you never disconnect your optical disk drive. I mean, in general, you should just never connect the drive at all, but particularly when you're doing an update. Doing so could corrupt the firmware and or put the firmware of your optical disk drive into a non-matching state with either your NAND or your hard drive and can start causing E100 errors. The E100 error is very difficult to repair if you can repair it at all. If you're getting an E100 error, one of the things you should test is whether or not your Blu-ray drive accepts a disk. If it doesn't, basically it acts as if it's not powered on, then you may be unable to repair that system. I have noticed on Xbox One S models that doing a part of this process of repairing your system, you can still occasionally see an E100 error that you can get around. And when you get to the part of doing the OSU1 offline update, the error can go away, but that doesn't always seem to be the case. But just keep that in mind. As long as you get an error that's not an E100, you're still in pretty good shape, and it's most likely referring to hard drive issues. Now, aside from repairing or replacing your existing Xbox One hard drive, you may want to upgrade your hard drive. So maybe you have a 500 gigabyte system and you want to upgrade it to a 1 terabyte drive or even a 2 terabyte drive. The other thing you might want to do is not necessarily upgrade the space, but upgrade the speed. So you might have a 500 gigabyte drive and you want to install a 500 gigabyte SSD. And the 7.0 Xbox One partitioning script supports that. There's actually two methods of upgrading the drive. But the first I'm going to mention here is the direct copy upgrade. So in this particular case, and what I mean by direct copy is that you need to have the existing functioning, and as I state here, working standard drive and the new drive that you're going to be upgrading to both need to be connected to your Windows or Linux on Mac or PC hardware at the same time. This can be a little tricky on Windows. It needs to be done in a few steps, but it does work. On Linux, it's a little more straightforward. But again, you'll need 2 SATA to USB adapters, unlike a regular repair where you only need 1. Again, if you have a way to hook up more than one 2.5-inch SATA drive to either your desktop or your laptop, you won't need a SATA to USB adapter, but most people are going to need some sort of adapter if they don't have one already. Now, in the case of doing an upgrade, in order for that upgrade to take and be able to maintain and keep all your games and profiles that were installed on your prior drive, you need to make sure that drive that you're upgrading from is a working drive, and it needs to be of standard size. When you're going to the new drive, in this case, I have a picture of a 2 terabyte FireCuda drive. That new wiped drive can be a standard size, so you could be formatting it as in this case a 2 terabyte or a standard 2 terabyte drive. But if you had a larger 3 terabyte drive, you could also create a non-standard drive, or if you had a drive in between. But in order to use a non-standard size, and a non-standard size is a non-500 gigabyte, 1 terabyte, or 2 terabyte drive, you need to copy a working drive's data. You cannot create a non-standard size drive using the repair or replace process. You can only build a working standard drive first and then upgrade it to a non-standard size later. I will point out in my future videos how I recommend against doing this. I just recommend, if you're going to upgrade, to stick to the standard sizes, and or if you're not going to increase the size, then just go to either an SSD or an SSHD. Now, digging a little more into the standard versus non-standard drive types. So in the upper left-hand corner, we define how much size you actually get out of a standard drive, and the size that you'll see on your Xbox One is defined by the user content partition. So in the case of a standard 500 gigabyte drive, you'll see it as having 365 gigabytes free. In the case of a 1 terabyte drive, you'll have 781 gigabytes free. In the case of a 2 terabyte drive, you'll have 1,662 gigabytes free. And all the standard sizes, of course, support resetting your system and keeping or maintaining those user content sizes. Now, on the left-hand side in the lower corner, we define a non-standard drive as having basically a non-standard user content partition. Now, in my testing, the minimum user content size that you can have is by using a 256 gigabyte drive. I actually have a video showing a 256 gigabyte SSD being installed into an Xbox One. And again, that was copied from a working or standard size 500 gigabyte, 1 terabyte, or 2 terabyte drive in order to decrease it. But I recommend going no smaller than 256 gigabytes because, as you can see, the actual size winds up being 138 gigabytes in size for user content or of usable space. If you use a drive half that size, you'd only have about 10 gigabytes free. Now, as far as the max user content is concerned, I had done videos in the past showing a 4 terabyte and a 5 terabyte drive being installed in an Xbox One. And then I later did videos showing you how you can't actually use that extended space. So I've done some testing and determined that the maximum user content or usable space you can put on an internal drive is 1,947 gigabytes. And basically that is because you can't have a partition and or use more than 2,048 gigabytes or basically 2 terabytes of drive space on your internal drive. So the 1948 comes from the other 4 partitions, which you don't see illustrated here, but the other 4 partitions take up space, and they actually take up exactly 100 gigabytes, which is why I'm using 1947 instead of 2047. But I also took away an additional gigabyte just to be sure that we didn't go all the way to the end of the disk and cause issues. So the new 7.0 script won't allow you to create a user content partition or use any more space than the 1,947 gigabytes you see here. Now, as you can see, making non-standard drives doesn't really make a lot of sense here because you are only going to gain a little over 200 gigabytes of size if you use anything bigger than a 2 terabyte drive. And then going smaller than a 500 gigabyte drive, you see how little space you'll actually have available to you. And on top of that, you cannot reset a non-standard drive. If you attempt to reset, it will basically shrink it down to the nearest size that you defined on the drive. So for instance, if you decided to use the biggest 2 terabyte drive possible by using a 3 terabyte drive, if you reset the drive, it'll shrink it down to 2 terabytes, if not cause some sort of E100 or 200 error. And again, you can only copy from a standard drive to create a non-standard drive. Now, as I pointed out, you can use a regular hard disk, a solid-state drive, or a solid-state hybrid drive. As long as it's a 2.5-inch drive and it's a SATA drive, it's all good. In the upper right corner, I point out what I would suggest you use. So if you're looking to both increase the space of your internal drive and the performance, the Seagate 2TB FireCuda 2.5-inch solid-state hybrid drive is the best price to performance drive you can buy. And I believe it's a sub 100 price tag for that drive, and it's only about $10 more than a regular 2TB hard drive that doesn't perform as well. Now in the bottom center, I point out that don't be fooled. Sometimes when you're buying a drive online, it's not always clearly labeled as a 2.5 or a 3.5-inch drive. You cannot use a 3.5-inch drive. 3.5-inch drives are desktop drives. They are significantly larger. They actually measure to about 4 inches in size. So the 3.5-inch drives are far too large to put in your Xbox One, and they won't fit in any of the models, the X, the S, or the original Xbox One. So just be aware of that. If you pick up one of those drives, you won't be able to use it. Make sure you return it and get a 2.5-inch drive, or make sure when you initially buy the drive that it's a 2.5-inch drive. And again, I mentioned that user content greater than 1948 GB will not work. If you extend user content to anything larger than that, you'll instantly get some sort of error, either E105 or an E106 error. And the last thing to mention is the bottom right graphic, which shows a 5TB drive. And I just mentioned if you have a drive that's too large, so for instance, if you have a 3TB drive, you could just simply build it as a 2TB standard drive. If you have a 512GB drive, build it as a 500GB drive. I've had a couple people ask that in the past. They had a 512GB SSD and they wanted to know what to do. Well, you'll lose 12 gigabytes, but that's okay, because when it's a standard when it's formatted as a standard 500GB drive, it'll work fine and will reset properly, and you'll be able to take advantage of the additional speed, such as loading the dashboard and booting games faster. Now, new to the Windows partitioning script is a feature I call backup and restore upgrade. So unlike the direct copy upgrade that you have been able to do in the past with the Windows and Linux partitioning script, which requires having both drives attached to a computer at the same time, either a PC or a Mac, for the backup and restore upgrade, you only need to have one USB to SATA adapter, or basically one 2.5-inch SATA drive connected to your system at a time. One of the caveats of this process, though, is that you'll need to make sure you have enough local disk space on your Windows system to hold all the Xbox One drive content. This includes all the data contained in the 5 partitions on your Xbox One drive. Now again, for this process, you have to copy from a working standard 500GB, 1TB, or 2TB drive. That doesn't necessarily refer to the physical size of the drive, but that refers to how the drive is partitioned. Now, unlike the direct copy process, the new formatted drive has to be a standard size. So again, it could be a 5TB drive, but you could only partition it as a standard size of 500GB, 1TB, or 2TB, and it can be a hard disk drive, a solid-state drive, or a solid-state hybrid drive. Now, one of the other nice features of the backup and restore upgrade, aside from only requiring one USB to SATA adapter, is that you can back up your hard drive data for later use. Particularly, it gives you a backup of your system update partition, which you could use to later rebuild or repair your Xbox One drive. Now, unfortunately, that backup is only good until you either install or delete a game from your new drive or the drive that you're using in your Xbox One, or if you do a network upgrade or use an OSU1 to do an offline update, as soon as you do that, the old hard drive and the data that you backed up from that old hard drive will not work properly anymore. It'll be missing the proper update files, and ghosting can occur if you install a new game on your new drive and then go back to your old drive. You'll see the game listed, but because it was installed on your new drive and not on your old drive, you won't actually be able to play the game, and you won't actually be able to delete it. So it's important to remember, once you upgrade, the old drive or the backup that you made is only good for a short amount of time. Now, just to go over some of the added features of the 7.0 script, this is actually a snippet from the actual script contents itself, where I keep a change history. Some of these items have a date dating back a couple months ago, and that's because every once in a while I get comments in my YouTube videos suggesting future features, and I'll add them to the changelog, but I won't necessarily get to those features later. So one of the features someone had requested was to check to see if the drive letters that the direct copy and or the repair upgrade process was going to use are free to use with the script. I thought that was a pretty good idea, and I'll show you that in a bit, and certainly I'll show you that in my future videos, what that feature actually looks like. The second feature I have listed there is copying data to a local drive when only one SATA adapter is available. That was, again, a feature someone had asked for because they only had one adapter cable and they wanted to be able to upgrade to a larger hard drive, and they wanted to have a process that supported that, which is something that I added. And again, I'll show you that in action in one of my future videos. The third item there is find and log the current system language code. I'll show you that working, but this was added because the Windows partitioning script particularly only properly supports the English language. So the script will check to see if you have the English language installed. You do not have to make it your default language, but if your primary language on your Windows system is Portuguese or Spanish or some other language, you'll need to make sure you have the English language installed. The script will actually check for it and let you know if it's there, and it will temporarily change your shell and or the PowerShell or the Windows command prompt to use English so that the script will function properly. And that's dependent on the script itself understanding what language you have to know what language to switch to, because later it will need to switch back to your original system language. And if it's unclear as to what language that is, it won't be able to switch the language in the first place. So I added a way to log what language you have so that when you're having an issue using the script, you can tell me what language the script showed you as having, and then I can update the script accordingly. And lastly, and perhaps the most important feature added to the 7.0 script, is to warn of drive size limitation and limit to a 2 terabyte user content. So again, while you can gain a couple hundred extra gigabytes on your user content partition or on your Xbox One internal drive by using a drive larger than 2 terabytes, the script won't allow you to create a user content partition bigger than your Xbox One system can actually properly use. Okay, and the last slide I have here is showing you my Series 7 roadmap. So I have plans to be doing a bunch of videos in the future, and as you can see, I've only got one done so far that came out about a month ago. And then we have, of course, the introduction video you're watching here is the #1 video. But the idea, again, with this new series is to have a video for each or as many scenarios possible that would best apply to your particular situation. So if you have an Xbox One with a failed hard drive, I'll show you how to do that. And if you're just looking to upgrade your existing hard drive to a larger hard drive or a faster hard drive, I'll have some videos showing you that. But also what I'd like to add to my channel is some teardown videos of taking apart each of the 3 models of the Xbox One, the X, the S, and the OG models. I have done that to a certain extent in the past, but I'd like to make specific videos to that process and show you all the tricks I've learned over the years of how to do that, how to take those systems apart. And then lastly, those last 3 videos are some internal timing videos, And I recorded that quite some time ago, which is to basically show you the speed differences between a regular hard drive, an SSD, and a solid-state hybrid drive. And I do that by loading up a bunch of the same games with each of the hard drives and recording the load up times. And I've been sitting on those videos for a while because I didn't expect to run into so many issues installing a non-standard internal drive that was larger than 2 terabytes. But with the 7.0 script, I hope to rectify that. Now lastly, before I get to showing you guys actual repair and upgrades of Xbox One systems, I just wanted to show you what some of the new features actually look like in the Windows partitioning script. I won't show you the Linux script here, but I will have Linux specific videos in the future. Now you can see above here I have the new versions listed and the language ID. So if you're having trouble using this script, this language ID is what you'll want to send to me so I can figure out what's going on with your particular language on your particular system. But you can see here it checks to make sure you're running the script as administrator. I will show that in detail in my future videos. Next, it checks for the English language availability and whether or not you have it, and will instruct you what to do if it fails. Next is one of the new features that I mentioned, which is checking to make sure the drive letters that you need for running this script are available. Now, the Xbox One hard drive has 5 partitions, and as you can see, there's 10 drives here. The H, I, J, K, and L drives are only needed if you're doing a direct copy. If you're doing a repair or replace, you'll only need to worry about having U, V, W, X, or Y free. Or if you're using the newer backup and restore method, again, you only need U through Y. And below that, I mentioned how you can adjust what drive letters. So if you see that one of your physical drives in your system is in one of these positions, you can go in and actually edit the script and change whatever drive is conflicting with a different drive letter. Most people shouldn't have to worry about this. Okay, so the next thing, after we press any key here, it will attempt to swap your language to English. And this is the latest menu for the 7.0 script, with the added E here for restoring system update, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So you would use the A option here for replace or repair without a working original drive. I say replace or upgrade because even if you have a 500 gigabyte system, or you purchased your system as a 500 gigabyte system and your hard drive failed, you can go directly to 2 terabytes at that point. So basically the process you would use to repair or rebuild your drive, you just would do that with a 2 terabyte drive, because every Xbox One system can be a 500 gigabyte, a 1 terabyte, a 2 terabyte system. It's defined by the drive itself, not the system. Now you would use the B option if you had original data and you wanted to copy that data to the new drive. This is referred to as the direct copy method. So we'd use the B option to do a direct copy, keeping original drive data. The C is for fixing the GUID values. It's the next step for the B option. Again, a future video will show that in detail. The D option is a part of my backup and restore method. Now, while it says backup system update to the current directory, when you select that option, it'll actually give you an option to give you the ability to select just backing up system update or all 5 partitions at once, including system update. Now the E option is for after you've done a backup of your existing Xbox One drive, you can restore the data. Generally, the process would be to use the D option to back up your system, the A option to build or format your new drive, and then the E option to restore the data to it. Again, that will be detailed in a future video. The last 2 options here you'd use less often. the check all partitions for file system errors. Generally, you would use this to make sure all your partitions are clean for if you're going to use something like a Clonezilla or you're going to clone your Xbox One drive. And that's a valid method. I won't be making a video of this in this particular series, but if you're going from the same size drive to another of the same size drive, so for instance, if you're going from a 500 gigabyte regular hard drive to a 500 gigabyte solid state drive, you can use my script to copy the drive contents, or you could just clone the drive contents. The problem is with something like Clonezilla, which is run from Linux, it can't repair dirty NTFS drives. And if the drives are marked dirty, all that means is they were taken out of the system without it properly powering down. Even if there's nothing actually wrong with those partitions, it'll need to be marked clean before Clonezilla will even touch it and attempt to copy its contents. So that's where the F option comes in, probably the option you'll use least often. The G option you might use a little more often, which is to wipe a drive of all partitions and GUID values. So if you have a drive that came from another system and it's not already blank, you didn't buy it new, or it's being used from another system, or if it's an Xbox One drive that you'd want to repurpose or reuse, then the G option is a good option for you. And lastly is just the cancel option. So overall, this is a video to quickly introduce the latest version of my script, and there'll be links in the description to where to download that version. And hopefully this will give you more information about the Xbox One hard drive process and some of the rules, and even give you an idea for what you might want to do in terms of what drive you'd like to purchase to upgrade your system, or if you're repairing your system, what options you have available to you. Well, I look forward to making more of the videos in this series, and I hope that you find the information in this video useful. All right, I'll see you guys in my next video.